Hey guys, tonight we step quietly into the fog-draped mountains of ancient China, where candlelight flickers through temple windows, scrolls crackle under nervous fingers, and monks in layered silk robes whisper about immortality over boiling pots of mysterious powder. You breathe in the scent, earthy metallic and just a little bit suspicious. This is no ordinary potion brewing session. This is a scene where ambition and mysticism collide, where people chase eternal life with the same reckless enthusiasm some of us apply to online shopping at 2 a.m. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this one. At least not without singed eyebrows or a good scare. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and what time it is where you're listening, whether you're nodding off in New York or winding down in Wellington. Now dim. The lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the base of misty green mountains, trailing behind a shaggy mule, carrying copper pots and folded paper charms. The year somewhere in the Tang Dynasty. The destination, a Taoist alchemy lab. Picture it like a rustic spa retreat. Except the spa treatments are powdered cinnabar, the air smells like burnt sulfur, and the goal is to become immortal, or at least to die trying. Inside the mountaintop hut, two alchemists argue softly. One is grinding minerals with a jade pestle, the other is pouring wine into a clay furnace shaped like a turtle. Their beards are long, their robes are russet and teal, and their patience is immense. They're brewing something called elixir of life, a mixture of mercury, sulfur, saltpeter, and crushed dragon's bone, which may or may not just be a particularly old ox femur. Your job is to hand them ingredients. Go ahead. Just toss that pinch of saltpeter in. Nothing bad ever happens when you mix combustible white powder with open flame, right? The Tang Dynasty, flourishing between the 7th and 10th centuries, CE was a playground for Taoist scholars and mystical experimenters. While some monks translated sutras and others meditated under waterfalls, the real thrill-seekers were in huts like this, grinding, boiling, and evaporating substances in the name of immortality. These early chemists documented their findings in calligraphy so beautiful, you almost don't notice when it says warning. This one made Li Wei's hair fall out. You watch the pot bubble. It smells like someone set fire to a library full of herbs. The alchemist next to you hums, oblivious until pop. A small flash escapes the lid. Both men freeze. One raises an eyebrow, the other grins. Promising, he says. This is where it begins. Historians still argue whether these early Taoist alchemists truly knew they were on the verge of discovering gunpowder. Some believe it was a total accident, a byproduct of chasing immortality through increasingly deranged combinations of sulfur and saltpeter. Others think a few might have suspected the explosive potential but kept quiet. After all, what better way to dodge taxes and impress warlords than with a little magical combustion? You step outside the hut for a break. The view is breathtaking. Clouds drift below you, and somewhere wind chimes clink gently. But back inside, things are heating up. One alchemist adds honey to a glowing red liquid. The pot hisses. You lean closer and boom. A flash of white, a puff of smoke, and the lid is gone. So is the ceiling. You blink soot out of your eyes and watch it snow down like burned confetti. The alchemists look far too pleased for people who just lost half a roof. The irony isn't lost on you in their quest to defeat death. They stumbled on something that could very easily speed it up. This wild pursuit of longevity produced many things: philosophical treatises, dangerous tinctures, and some truly bad breath from heavy mercury consumption. But none of those left the kind of mark that one unstable powder would. Outside the hut, a goat sneezes as a wisp of sulfur floats through the air. Inside, the alchemists are already scribbling new notes, one eye twitching as he writes too much charcoal. Reduce by half next time. Quirky historical side note. One particularly determined emperor allegedly ingested so many mercury-based elixirs that he glowed before promptly dying. That's dedication. Or denial. Possibly both. You sit in the corner as they start the next brew. This time the ingredients shimmer under the candlelight red, arsenic yellow, sulfur-powdered jade. The air vibrates with a strange expectancy, and for a second you swear you see one monk mouth a prayer, or possibly the phrase, "duck and cover." And yet despite the failures, the explosions, and the absolutely bonkers combinations of minerals, no one gives up. They truly believe the secret lies just one mixture away. Not fire, not death, but life everlasting. You, however, are beginning to suspect that the only thing eternal here is the smoke stain on your robe and the persistent ringing in your ears. As dusk sets over the mountains and the wind carries the scent of scorched hope down into the valley, you wonder what happens when people mix science with faith and curiosity with desperation. Sometimes they get a miracle. Other times they invent fireworks. You wake to the sound of someone sharpening a bamboo reed against a stone, the hiss rhythmic and soft like a lullaby for scholars. One of the alchemists, the older one with sunspots on his hands and eyebrows like startled caterpillars, is already hard at work. He hasn't slept. His scrolls are unfurled across the floor like the world's most dangerous origami project. There's a list written in black ink, cinnabar, saltpeter, sulfur, honey pine resin. Some of those you recognize from last night's near miss. Others, not so much. You sit up slowly, muscles aching from where you passed out against a sack of millet. Your tongue tastes like smoke and regret. Outside, the mountain is quiet, but you know better now. Somewhere in this stillness is the thrum of change. Because what they've created, these accidental puffs and flashes, won't stay in this hut for long. You trail the younger alchemist as he makes his way down the mountain path toward a nearby monastery. He carries a cloth-wrapped bundle carefully cradled in both hands. You follow behind and try not to imagine it going off like a firecracker in the wind. This isn't a weapons delivery, not yet. This is show and tell. The monks in the monastery look only mildly alarmed when the bundle is revealed to contain a small wax paper tube filled with powder. A fuse made of twined hemp juts from one end. The monk raises an eyebrow. For demons, he asks. The alchemist nods. Or festivals, he adds. It's hard to tell if that makes it better or worse. They light it. The fuse sizzles. You take an instinctive step behind a statue of Guan Yin. With a sharp crack and a flash of yellow light, the device pops. It doesn't explode so much as express itself. Briefly and enthusiastically, like a toddler learning to whistle. The monks flinch. One drops his bowl of rice. Then they begin to laugh. Not out of humor, but out of wonder. Something primal stirs in the echo of that sound. Power, yes, but also joy. And that's when you realize the transition is beginning. From potion to pyrotechnic. From medicine to magic. From immortality to artillery. Historians still argue whether this moment the adaptation of gunpowder from elixirs to entertainment was driven by religious ritual or social delight. Some suggest monks used these early firecrackers to ward off evil spirits during funerals. Others think it was just really fun to make things go bang during a festival. Either way, it caught on. Fast. In the town below, whispers of smoke flowers begin to circulate. Artisans start experimenting with bamboo tubes and crushed seeds. Children imitate the crackling sounds with pebbles in wooden cups. And you're tasked with delivering ingredients. Again. This time to a man whose hands are permanently stained orange from sulfur. This new figure is no monk. He's a merchant, and he smells opportunity the way a wolf smells weakness. He listens intently as the alchemist explains the formula, nodding as if he understands, then immediately starts sketching a bigger tube, one that could fly. You get sent to gather reeds from the river. It's peaceful work until you notice the young merchant is now strapping your bundles into strange, triangular frames. He calls them Phaeon, flying swallows. When you return, one is already lodged into a hollow log aimed skyward. Another flash, another bang. This one whines a little on the way up. Not enough to be a weapon, but enough to make a dog run for cover and 3 children burst into applause. A quirky historical footnote. Some of these early rockets were launched during weddings. The logic, scaring away evil spirits, so the couple could live happily ever after and possibly to test the groom's reflexes. You spend the next few weeks trekking between mountaintop labs, temple courtyards, and crowded marketplaces. Each time you return, the devices have grown more ambitious. Curved tips, bundled fuses, decorative etching. Someone even invents a paper label with a picture of a laughing tiger on it. The name, Huo Hua Fireflower. No one calls it gunpowder yet. It's still Huo Yao fire medicine, a remedy, a charm, a thrill. You begin to hear rumors. In Chang'an, a noble family paid 10 silver coins for a single firecracker display during a birthday celebration. In Luoyang, a street magician made a tiger leap from a box using only smoke and sound. And in the southern provinces, a general has sent word he wants to know if these fire sticks can be aimed at enemies. You don't like the way that last one sounds. Still, it's impossible not to be captivated. One night you sit atop a tiled roof in a quiet village, holding a cone-shaped paper rocket. When you light it, the fuse dances with gold sparks, then bursts upward, whistling, spinning. For a heartbeat, the stars blink out, replaced by crimson flame and drifting ash. It's beautiful. It's terrifying. And it's only the beginning. By now, you've accepted that your new role in life is something between unpaid intern and walking hazard sign. The alchemists may have chased immortality, but you've become a full-time courier of controlled chaos. The fire medicine, once a mystical tonic tucked in scroll-wrapped jars, is now being portioned into little parchment packets labeled with cryptic symbols and very inconsistent warnings. Today's journey takes you into the city Chang'an. And if you thought the mountaintop was busy, this place is like a beehive. Got stuck inside a drum. Ox carts jam the streets, silk vendors shout prices that make no sense, and children dart underfoot like sugar-fueled projectiles. But you're here for one thing, a demonstration. A general, yes. That kind of general has summoned the alchemists to a private courtyard. Word is he heard about the fire sticks and wants to know what else they can do besides impress monks and scare pigeons. You arrive just as the first test begins. The target a dummy made of bamboo and stuffed with straw wearing what looks like last season's armor. The setup a bamboo tube mounted on a small wooden frame packed with powder and pebbles with a long twisted fuse. The goal: make history. They light the fuse. You instinctively flinch and brace for another comedic misfire. But this time the result is very different. With a thunderous hiss, the tube spits out smoke and a handful of iron bits, most of which land directly on the target. A puff of straw erupts. The dummy sways. The general claps. You don't. See, this is where it starts to shift. No more wedding amusements or funerary poppers. This is fire as force, a toy no longer. It's becoming a weapon. Historians still argue whether this moment in Chang'an was the first military trial of gunpowder. Some believe earlier prototypes were used to defend fortress gates or frighten nomads during skirmishes. Others suggest that generals initially dismissed it as too unreliable. After all, nothing ruins a battle formation like a flaming accident 2 seconds into your plan. But this general, he seems intrigued. You find yourself dragged into a very new, very smoky workshop where men with soot-covered faces are packing clay pots full of the powder. They call them thunder crash bombs. Very subtle. These are hurled by slings or catapults. And yes, you are invited to help fill one. And no, you do not want to know what happens when you overstuff it. One quirky, completely real detail. Some of these early bombs were painted with wide-eyed demon faces to scare the enemy. Imagine being a soldier and your last sight is a pottery sphere with a goofy grin and angry eyebrows barreling toward your head. Meanwhile, word spreads. Fire medicine is no longer just for the wise or the weird. Artisans, merchants, and generals are all taking notes, all improvising. Some try packing the powder into hollow bamboo spears. Others create small flame jets for booby traps. One man proposes mounting fire tubes onto wagons, but abandons the plan when the wagon catches fire halfway through the test. You spend your nights sleeping near barrels of saltpeter. Not ideal. It smells vaguely like stale urine and doom. But you're too curious to walk away. You're watching history evolve, albeit from dangerously close range. Late one night in the workshop's back room, you hear an argument. The young alchemist and the merchant-turned-inventor are whisper shouting. You only catch fragments, not medicine anymore. This isn't what we meant. Think of the Emperor's face when he sees it fly, and that's when it hits you. This invention has slipped the leash. It's no longer about healing or even enlightenment. It's become something larger, louder, and far less predictable. The next morning, you witness your first mass demonstration. In a fortified courtyard, 20 men light 20 tubes mounted to a frame. They fire in quick succession, flashes, bangs, black smoke rising like an angry ghost from the earth. A flock of birds explodes out of the trees nearby. One of the tubes misfires and singes a poor scribe's scrolls. Everyone claps anyway. You realize something odd. The generals aren't just impressed, they're giddy. They see dominance, surprise, the edge in a war that has lasted too long with too many swords and not enough spectacle. But you dusty, wide-eyed, probably losing your sense of smell, see something else. You see the end of an era, one where monks chased eternal life under starlight, mixing mercury with prayers. One where powders were stirred, with hope not strategy. And while you're not a scholar or a monk or a general, you feel it in your gut. Fire medicine has crossed a threshold, and there's no going back. By now your dreams smell faintly of charcoal and saltpeter. You wake with ash on your tunic and you're not even surprised. You've started to identify types of burns by scent. Ah, yes, that's a fuse burn, not a full detonation. It's a skill no one should have to learn. But then again, no one should be carrying tiny clay pots of weaponized fire through the streets of medieval China either. You're back in the capital. Chang'an feels different, not just busy, on edge. Word of the Alchemists' experiments has spread far beyond the generals, and not all the reactions are good. One morning, you walk past a paper stall and see a crude drawing of a firework tube on a handbill with text you can't entirely read. Someone nearby mutters about playing God. A woman selling dumplings calls it sky poison. There's tension now. You've helped create something both mesmerizing and terrifying, and that combination is never safe in the wrong hands. The young alchemist seems torn. He still scribbles formulas by candlelight, still dreams of perfecting the spark-to-smoke ratio. But his eyes carry the look of someone who's opened a box he's not sure how to close. To distract yourselves, you return to a gentler idea. Could fire medicine go back to being fun? So you help design the first aerial flower. A paper tube packed with powder and colored salts. No iron shards, no clay shards. Just beauty. You spend a week arguing about the perfect launch angle, how to reinforce the bamboo frame, how to time the burst. You nearly lose an eyebrow. Twice. But on the 8th try, it works. A comet of fire lifts from the launch rack, curls upward, and blooms into a shimmering flower of golden sparks. The courtyard erupts in cheers. Even the merchant who has been sulking about lost military contracts can't help but clap. It's a reminder this invention still has joy in it. Mainstream fact fireworks like this will over the next century spread through royal courts across Asia, eventually reaching Europe by the 13th century via trade routes and Mongol incursions. Some scholars even argue that Marco Polo may have witnessed early forms of them, though others say the timeline's a stretch. But back here, back in your now scorched slippers, the success draws attention from a very different corner, the imperial court. You're summoned again. This time not by a general, but by an advisor with robes so pressed they could slice tofu. The emperor, you're told, is interested in celebratory displays. Translation, they want the alchemist's invention, but only the fun part, which is a relief. For now. You're ushered into a courtyard of breathtaking elegance, silk drapes, jade statues, koi ponds that probably have titles. The emperor isn't there, of course, he's busy being divine somewhere, but a few dozen nobles are lounging on pillows, waiting to be entertained. The pressure is absurd. If this fire show flops, you might get banished to the mosquito fields. You light the fuse, and it works. A burst of indigo stars followed by a crackle of saffron trails, ending with a deep crimson shimmer that lingers like a blush. The nobles gasp. One of them says, "It's like watching a phoenix sneeze." You'll take it. The alchemist grins. So do you. Then the court wants more. Bigger bursts, shapes in the sky, coordinated sequences. You're now managing the Tang Dynasty's equivalent of a pyrotechnics crew. You even get custom robes embroidered with gold thread, though you burn a hole in the sleeve on day 2. Things get flashy. There are nighttime displays over palace lakes. Birthday celebrations lit with shimmering willow sparks. Even funerals with somber gold arcs and slow drifting embers. And it feels for a time like you've redeemed the powder. The fire is back where it belongs, making people look up, not duck for cover. But history, as you know by now, is never that tidy, because someone's always watching. A northern envoy, tall, silent, unimpressed, attends one of your fire shows. He doesn't clap. He doesn't even blink. But weeks later, you hear that someone up north has begun experimenting with their own tubes, their own powders, their own dreams of power. And just like that, the race begins. Historians still argue whether this spread of gunpowder tech was accidental or inevitable. Some say it was shared deliberately as a show of prestige. Others insist it leaked through trade routes scribbled into smuggled scrolls or whispered by defectors. One fringe theory even claims a wayward monk shared the secret out of guilt. Whatever the truth, the genie is well and truly out. You return to the mountaintop just to breathe. The furnace is still there, but quieter now. The air feels cooler, the stars more curious than judgmental. The alchemist joins you. He's older barely, but his eyes carry centuries. You talk about the early days, about the quest for eternal life, about sulfur, saltpeter, charcoal, and choices. Funny he says we were trying to escape death, and we made something that sings at weddings and screams in battle. You both laugh. Because what else can you do? You thought the mountaintop would give you distance, time to breathe. But tranquility doesn't last long when someone's shouting up the trail about new visitors. And these ones aren't monks or merchants. They're scholars from far provinces carrying scrolls and questions, and the kind of polite urgency that says, "We know what you've done, and we're here to study it." Suddenly, you're back in the mix. The fire medicine has caught the attention of academics now, those robe-clad catalogers of everything humans don't quite understand. They come armed with diagrams, alternate theories, and a frustrating habit of questioning everything you thought was true. Are you sure the ratio is 3-to-1? Have you tried using mulberry paper instead of bamboo wrapping? Do you suppose the gods feel insulted by this? You sigh. A lot. The young alchemist, who's really not that young anymore, welcomes the scrutiny. He starts calling the compound huo yao more often now fire drug. The term sticks. Your days are now spent helping record experiments, precise quantities, humidity levels, fuse lengths. You even start using weights carved from polished jade, because of course measuring things with rice bowls is no longer enough. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the early 11th century, Chinese texts began documenting the precise recipes for gunpowder. One such text, the Wujing Zongyao, included formulas for various military applications from incendiary arrows to bombs. This wasn't just science, it was statecraft. But here's the fringe bit. Some versions of the scroll also included mysterious poetic warnings cautioning against waking the dragon that sleeps beneath the powder. Some interpret this as metaphor. Others believe it was a reference to actual superstitions, an idea that tampering too deeply with the elements would disturb celestial forces. And disturb them you do. One afternoon, during a test of a modified rocket arrow design, the launch misfires. The arrow soars 20 feet straight into a tree, and then explodes after a delay. The explosion scares the nearby oxen so badly that they stampede through the scholars' camp, sending scrolls and bowls, and one poor intern flying. No one is seriously injured unless you count egos. You spend the evening helping collect wind-scattered parchment from a ravine. The scholars are not deterred. In fact, they're thrilled. Unstable but promising one writes. And that becomes the mood, a delicate balance between chaos and curiosity. You start seeing more diagrams of devices. hand cannons made of bronze, fire lances, essentially spears that breathe flame. One prototype mounts a fire tube onto a wheelbarrow. It tips over instantly. Back to the scroll. The alchemist seems somber. They're not searching for understanding anymore, he murmurs. They're searching for control. Control, yes. That old temptation. Because once something explodes, predictably, someone will try to make it explode better, bigger, farther. You catch snippets of new names, western provinces, far kingdoms, rumors that traveling monks have seen similar sparks in foreign lands. One merchant swears he sold saltpeter to a Persian in the southern ports. Another boasts that the Mongols have taken an interest. Historians still argue whether China's fire drug spread westward gradually through trade or was accelerated by conquest. Some cite the Silk Road as a key artery. Others insist it was the Mongol invasions that truly flung the secret across borders. Either way, the timeline is slippery, but the consequence is clear: the fuse was lit. Meanwhile, back on your mountain, another kind of transformation is happening. Festivals have changed. People no longer just wear red for good luck. They launch red sparks into the sky. Paper dragons now glide under fire-lit arcs. Children cheer as golden willow bursts shimmer above their heads. You help prepare one of the largest firework displays for the Lantern Festival, and it's glorious. 3,000 spectators, one misfired rocket, your fault again, and the moment when everyone gasps together at the blue burst, shaped like a chrysanthemum. It's magic, and it's fleeting, because just as quickly the mood turns. News from the South rebel factions using fire tubes in ambushes. Northern warlords demanding shipments of firebombs. The Emperor still divines, still mostly absent issues, decrees about strategic application of fire-based devices. The mountain is no longer a sanctuary. It's a factory. Barrels arrive daily. Saltpeter from distant mines. Sulfur from coastal traders, charcoal packed into sacks still warm from the kiln. You look around and realize you're running an arms lab. You used to light stars in the sky. Now you're counting fuse lengths to the millisecond and wondering whether a copper casing provides a better burst radius than clay. The monk who once oversaw mercury distillation now calculates projectile trajectories on a sand table. At night, you sit by the kiln, hands, dusty heart heavier than your robes. You think back to your first week, the strange scrolls, the boiling flasks, the accidental pops that nearly took off your eyebrows. You remember laughing. You miss laughing. The alchemist joins you and you both say nothing. Because what can you say? The invention has grown beyond both of you. It has become what every invention fears, relevant. You still love the shimmer, still pause at the hiss of a fuse, the heartbeat of ignition, the golden scatter of light. But it's not just yours anymore. It belongs to history now. And history is rarely gentle with its toys. By now, your fingers are permanently stained with charcoal, and your robes smell faintly of saltpeter and singed silk. You've become fluent in the language of combustion. You dream in ignition points. Sometimes you even mutter fuse lengths in your sleep, which has made the communal sleeping quarters slightly awkward. There's no escaping it anymore. What began as alchemical curiosity is now a bureaucratic enterprise. Every few days, messengers arrive on horseback scrolls sealed with red wax, bearing the imperial insignia. They carry orders, requisitions, sometimes even flattery masked as threats. Your brilliance is needed at the Eastern Front, one reads, as if you're a particularly helpful jar of pickled plums. The empire is changing, and you're part of the reason why. Here's your mainstream historical fact. During the Song Dynasty, Chinese officials formalized the use of gunpowder in warfare. They developed fire arrows, bombs, and even early grenades. The Zhenyuanbao True Origin Arsenal was one such production center for these early weapons, with meticulous records of their ingredients and instructions for mass production. But here's your fringe tidbit. Some surviving notes from the period reference spirit calibration, a process believed to align the fire compound with the user's intent. It involved meditating with the weapon, whispering blessings into the fuse, and only firing on an auspicious day, preferably when your horoscope wasn't trying to kill you. You try to keep things practical, but the rituals cling to the work like incense to a robe. One morning, a scribe arrives with something unexpected, a hand cannon. Not a scroll sketch, not a whispery rumor. An actual bronze tube, with a wooden stock and a snarling tiger face carved at the barrel mouth. It's heavy, ugly, and magnificent. You help test it on a hillside, aiming at a row of melon rinds. The recoil nearly knocks your shoulder out of alignment. The shot misses entirely and scorches a tree instead. Still, everyone claps like it's the debut of a new opera. Progress, it seems, is loud and imprecise. Not everyone is cheering, though. Some of the older monks keep their distance. "This was not our path," one says softly. You want to agree. You really do. But part of you also marvels at the sheer force, the strangeness of it. This bronze tiger roars in a way no drum ever could. Historians still debate whether the hand cannon marks the true beginning of firearms. Some call it a prototype, others insist it's more of a noise stick than a gun. But no matter what label you slap on it, the impact is real. You've held the future in your soot-covered hands, and it smells like burnt metal. The alchemist, your mentor, your friend, your co-conspirator in all things combustible, has started growing quieter. He spends less time with the fire drug and more in the temple library reading about the cycles of history, about empires that rose and fell long before yours. One evening, after a particularly smoky cannon test, he tells you, "There's no such thing as invention without consequence." The fire always spreads. You nod, unsure whether to be afraid or proud. Because the thing is, the applications are expanding far beyond war. Traders want the firepower for mining to clear rock more efficiently. Farmers wonder if it could frighten pests from the fields. One traveling performer wants to light a whole field of lotus lanterns at once. You help him design the timing mechanism, and it actually works. The crowd gasps. A woman faints. A goat escapes. It's chaos. It's glorious. But the balance is harder to maintain. The imperial court has started sending not just scribes, but inspectors. They wear tall black hats and don't smile much. They ask about output, about secrecy, about loyalty. You smile and offer them chrysanthemum tea while mentally preparing contingency plans involving tripwire traps and a hidden ladder behind the kiln. The alchemist becomes even more withdrawn. You find him one night sketching a strange device, layers of bamboo tubes, each stuffed with a slightly different powder blend. They'll call it a rocket battery, he says quietly. And then they'll say it was always meant to be used this way. You ask if he regrets it. He doesn't answer. Instead, he begins teaching you things he'd never shared before. Alternative compounds. The old Taoist classifications of elements. The way to stabilize a batch using crushed jade powder, not because it works better, but because the ritual makes you treat it with care. Fire listens, he tells you. When you rush it, it bites. You start taking notes more carefully. You speak more gently to the younger apprentices, even when they knock over an entire tray of ignited pellets again. You've started noticing how quickly the line between wonder and weapon can blur. One day news comes that changes everything. A battle far to the north was won with your designs. The enemy fled in confusion. Horses panicked at the sounds. Victory, they say, came without a single sword swing. You should be elated. Instead, you sit in the quiet of the scroll room re-rolling diagrams that now feel like something else entirely. Not knowledge, not progress, just momentum. The alchemist comes to stand beside you. We wanted immortality, he says. We got noise. You look at the stack of scrolls at the fire tubes lined along the wall at the barrel of sulfur leaking faintly into the air. Maybe it's both. You go outside, light a small chrysanthemum rocket, and watch it spin into the sky. Just for yourself. Just to remember what it used to feel like when light was enough. It bursts in gold and crimson, and for just a moment the mountain is quiet again. The palace summons arrive in the deep chill of early winter. The paper is thick perfumed and ominously red. It says nothing of celebration. It says, present yourself for demonstration. Bring your most impressive innovations. Leave nothing undocumented. You read it 3 times, then fold it carefully into your sleeve, pretending you didn't just feel your stomach slide toward your shoes. Your mentor sighs but says nothing. His silence says plenty. So you pack scrolls, fuses, prototypes, powders in silk-wrapped sachets. You leave the more volatile substances behind. Nobody wants to explain to an emperor why his silk drapes caught fire. Traveling to the capital is like threading a firecracker through a dragon's teeth. The roads are frozen. Your donkey hates explosives, and the guards at every checkpoint want to open your crates and poke your gear with suspicious chopsticks. Eventually, though, the gates of Kaifeng rise before you, wide, intricate, and cold as politics. Inside the imperial complex, you're herded into an outer courtyard with other alchemists, inventors, and performers. One man has brought a musical instrument that emits steam when played. Another has trained 2 magpies to reenact historical arguments. You're somewhere between the 2 less musical, but definitely more flammable. The courtyard smells like anticipation-oiled leather and someone's nervous sweat. Possibly yours. Your turn comes just after the fireworks master from the southern provinces. His display is pure theater, spinning wheels, fountains of blue flame bursts that pop into the shapes of lotuses and phoenixes. The crowd gasps. Someone claps too early and gets shushed. Then they turn to you. You've prepared a new series signal flares of different colors and pitches, small handheld rockets for nighttime navigation, and your personal favorite, a daisy chain fuse system that triggers a precise sequence of explosions across a row of miniature towers. You light the fuse. The line crackles. Each tower erupts in a staggered puff of white smoke and spark a perfect imitation of a siege from afar. The audience inhales sharply. Even the emperor leans forward. When it ends, there's a heartbeat of silence, then applause. Slow at first, then building. Even the minister of records, who has the facial flexibility of a stone lantern, nods once. You don't exhale until your mentor claps you on the shoulder and mutters, "No one fainted. You've done well." Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the 13th century, the Song dynasty had fully integrated gunpowder into military strategy, and court-approved alchemists were tasked with inventing ever more ingenious forms of combustion, from flamethrowers to bomb-throwing trebuchets. Records from the Wujing Zongyao, the collection of military classics, detail such innovations meticulously. But here's your fringe tidbit. Some versions of the Wujing Zongyao contain annotated doodles, small dragons, mischievous foxes, and even what looks suspiciously like a rabbit wearing scholar robes. Some believe bored scribes added them in secret. Others think they were charms, symbols meant to soften the harshness of their subject matter. Or perhaps reminders that all this fire began in pursuit of something gentler. Historians still argue whether fireworks and weaponry truly diverged, or whether they've always been two sides of the same bright, dangerous coin. You return to your mentor that evening, exhausted fingers, blackened eyebrows, slightly thinner from a miscalculated blast radius. He pours tea. You know he says it wasn't always like this. Before the emperors and the inspectors. When I was young, we used to light paper lanterns and float them over the river. Just for beauty. You nod. You've seen drawings of that thin rice paper glowing like jellyfish in the dark, drifting toward the stars with no purpose but peace. Maybe you should make something useless next, he says, smiling faintly. Just once. The suggestion sticks. In secret, late at night, you begin designing a device that does absolutely nothing productive. It's a paper dragon that puffs little smoke rings, a mechanical crab that scuttles in circles and occasionally releases a tiny spark from its claws. It serves no strategic value, which is exactly the point. When you test it in the quiet hours, you find yourself laughing not because it's funny exactly, but because it feels like remembering a joke from childhood. Something innocent. Something lost. One morning, a younger apprentice catches you with your paper dragon and assumes it's a training tool. He copies it, adds wings. Then a second apprentice sees that and decides to add a music box core. Soon there's a whole shelf of ridiculous contraptions, none of them particularly useful, all of them beautiful. The other alchemists notice, then the guards, then the kitchen workers. Before long, you're hosting an unofficial evening display, no weapons, no flames over 4 feet high. Just whimsy, just wonder. Someone strings lanterns across the courtyard. A child brings her mother's dumplings to share. Even one of the inspectors wanders by, chewing roasted chestnuts and pretending not to smile. Your mentor stands beside you as your mechanical crab ignites a row of tiny candles. "We never meant to make war," he says quietly. "Only light." You nod. But even as you do, you feel the shift beneath your feet. The way the court has started to call your team not alchemists, but fire masters. The way soldiers now shadow your travels. The way young apprentices ask how to make louder, brighter, faster. The dragon puffs another ring of smoke. You smile, but your chest feels tight. Because now you understand once you teach fire to dance, it never forgets the steps. The palace has changed. Once your visits were rare, occasional ceremonial filled with polite nods and incense-heavy air. Now you're summoned monthly, sometimes weekly. Each time the requests grow more urgent. The court no longer asks what's possible. It demands what's next. You're no longer experimenting in the name of curiosity. You're innovating on deadline. Tonight they want something new. Not just fireworks, something to intimidate, to dazzle, to make generals in border territories reconsider their loyalty before drawing their swords. So you arrive with your latest invention, a cluster-launch tube system that releases a timed volley of flaming spheres. They arc in perfect parabolas, then explode mid-air into shapes of roaring tigers and weeping willows. The audience gasps. One noblewoman drops her lacquered fan. And you standing there in the glow of your own creations realize something bone deep: you've crossed a line. There's no denying it anymore. Your work is no longer art. It's theater for the powerful. Pyrotechnic propaganda. Here's your mainstream historical fact. During the Southern Song Dynasty, gunpowder was institutionalized. Bureaucracies were formed solely to manage its production. Entire factories in cities like Kaifeng and Hangzhou specialized in weapons fuses and rocket systems. These weren't fringe experiments, they were state priorities. Here's your fringe tidbit. One particularly ambitious engineer attempted to build a flying crow with a fiery heart. It was a wooden glider shaped like a bird, packed with explosives and fitted with bamboo wings. Historians still debate whether it ever flew or just crashed dramatically in someone's courtyard, terrifying a lot of chickens and ending someone's career. But back to you. After the display, you're escorted, guided to a side chamber where several ministers wait. Their robes are thick with embroidery. Their eyes are sharper than the swords they command. One of them leans forward. He doesn't offer tea. "We want to deploy your Skyfire in the West," he says, voice measured. "We believe it will soften enemy morale. You nod, already regretting it. Because once the Emperor's court asks for your invention to be used in war, saying no isn't really an option. The following weeks are consumed with planning. You oversee packing, testing, diagramming, consulting with generals who use words like blast radius and shock value. It all feels clinical, detached. Then the day comes. You stand atop a hillside overlooking a quiet village on the border. The enemy camp, they say. But the roofs are the same color as yours. The trees don't look particularly rebellious. Somewhere a dog barks and you wonder if it knows what's coming. The order is given. The signal fire is lit. And then the sky splits. Your invention does exactly what it was designed to do. The horizon erupts in choreographed terror. Red flowers blossom in the night. Green lightning races across the clouds. Thunder with no storm. You don't watch the flames. You watch the silence after, the way it settles over the valley like ash. Historians still argue whether these early rocket systems changed the tide of war. Some say they were psychological weapons designed more to startle than destroy. Others claim they offered minimal advantage, more spectacle than substance. But you don't care about military theory. You care about the way a child from that village now dreams about fire, not stars. Back at the palace, you're celebrated, toasted, promoted. You're offered a robe with silver threading and a stipend large enough to feed every alchemist in your workshop 3 meals a day for a year. Your mentor accepts the news with the blank serenity of a man watching a candle burn down to the wick. "We were dreamers," he says quietly. "Then we became architects. Now we're engineers of fear." You sit in silence. Later that night, you walk alone to the storage chamber where failed prototypes are kept. You pick up the mechanical crab. Its gears are stiff, its paint chipped. You wind it gently just once. It shuffles forward and releases a single spark. Still works. Somewhere deep in your chest, something aches. You start visiting the river again. Quiet walks, no fireworks, just the swish of reeds, the occasional splash of a startled fish, the low hum of a world that's forgotten your name. One evening, a small boy joins you. He recognizes you, calls you Master of Flames, asks if you can make the moon explode. You laugh. Softly. No, you say. The moon is where all the broken fireflies go to rest. He nods, solemnly. Seems satisfied. Then he tells you about the time he saw a bird made of sparks dance across the night sky. How it flapped once and disappeared. You didn't make that one. But someone did. Maybe someone you trained. Maybe someone who only saw the spectacle and not the silence after. You wonder what it must be like to grow up in a world where fire in the sky is normal, expected, just part of the evening. You think of your mentor's words. You were dreamers. You were. And maybe, just maybe, you could be again. If you choose to. If it's not already too late. The years keep piling up like layers of soot in a used lantern. You grow older slower, but your fame doesn't. It expands outward, upward, beyond borders you've never crossed. You're no longer just the master of flames. You're whispered about along the Silk Road. You become a name in scrolls passed from merchant to monarch, from scholar to showman. And not just in China. Persians arrive wide-eyed and soot-smudged, asking to study in your workshop. Arab traders offer spices in exchange for a spark that roars. Even Venetian merchants, those silk-hatted dreamers with gold teeth and louder mouths, claim they've heard tales of fiery dragons from Cathay. They don't say it, but it's clear they want a piece of your secret. You know what they're really asking for. Not magic. Not wonder. Weaponry. Still, you teach them selectively. Just enough to impress, not enough to harm. You show them how to bind powder in braided paper tubes, how to shape nozzles for thrust. You even let one of them light a sky petal rocket during the Lantern Festival. He drops it, panics, and has to be rescued by a child with quicker reflexes. The crowd laughs until they cry. That's the moment you remember. This can still be joy. Here's your mainstream historical fact by the late Yuan and early Ming dynasties gunpowder-based devices spread across Eurasia. The knowledge leapfrogged from Chinese alchemists to Middle Eastern scholars to European tinkerers evolving along the way. Cannons in Ottoman sieges, fire lances in Mongol raids, eventually muskets in Spanish conquests, and your fringe tidbit. Some historians believe a rogue manuscript containing early gunpowder recipes traveled west inside a hollowed-out bamboo flute, disguised as a gift for a music-loving general. Others claim it was baked into flatbread, inked with formulas, and passed off as a snack. Historians still argue whether these tales are allegory or literal spycraft. But back to you. You don't chase titles anymore. You don't attend royal banquets even when summoned. You send polite refusals wrapped in silk, of course, with a pouch of peony crackers or jade-colored sparklers tucked inside. Courtiers sigh, half in frustration, half in nostalgia. The old dragon still burns, they joke. Instead, you return to the root of things. You take on 3 apprentices, not just clever but curious. One is a girl who smells like charcoal and carries a notebook full of firefly sketches. Another is a boy with a nervous stammer but an impeccable sense of wind direction. The third doesn't speak at all, but once shaped a clay phoenix that flapped its wings when heated. You don't teach them war. You teach them wonder. Your laboratory becomes quieter, less clang, more hum. You start using lotus oil instead of tallow. It burns cleaner, softer. The scent reminds you of spring even when it's snowing. One evening, you and your apprentices release a new creation, a floating lantern that sheds sparks like petals as it rises. It drifts so gently, so silently, that the gathered crowd forgets to cheer. They just watch. One child whispers, "It's like the stars are falling up." That one hits you right in the ribs. Later, alone in your garden, you think of your mentor again. His long silences, his hands stained yellow from sulfur. The day he watched your first sparkler pop and said only, he knew this path wasn't straight. That brilliance flickers. That discovery isn't always progress. And yet here you are. The empire changes again. Dynasties shift. Banners come down, new ones rise. A war brews, but it's far from your quiet corner. For now. Historians still argue whether alchemists like you should be credited with inventing fireworks, or whether you just nudged them into existence while chasing something else entirely. Immortality. Transmutation. A shortcut to heaven. But you remember how it actually started. With saltpeter. With sulfur. With charcoal. With a spark you didn't expect, and a noise that startled the crickets into silence. You remember being more scared than proud, and yet captivated. You sit with those memories now like a collection of old coins, some faded, some polished from overhandling, all of them earned. And then a knock at the gate. It's the girl apprentice, the one with the firefly notebook. She holds up a bundle. "A gift," she says. "My own formula. Cherry blossom, spark dust. Burns pink, fades into blue. You light it together. It hisses softly like a secret being shared. And then it blooms. Not just pink and blue, but gold, and white, and violet. Like a field of stars blooming in reverse. You blink, once, then laugh. Because even now, even after decades of burns, setbacks, co-opted glory, this little burst of surprise still feels like magic. Maybe it always was. Maybe the alchemists were never wrong. They didn't find eternal life in golden pills or jade drafts. But maybe they did, in a way, invent immortality. Every time someone looks up and says, "Ooh," they live on. Every child who claps at a sparkler, every couple who kisses under a sky of blooming light, every new apprentice who fumbles a fuse but lights the wick anyway. That's how you stay alive. Not forever, just long enough. You don't plan to die. Not in the dramatic way others expect, clutching a bottle of mercury, screaming something profound in a thunderstorm, or bursting into glitter like a final firework. But still one day you feel it. That flicker. Not a fire going out, just a quiet shift in the flame. You wake, and your hands are slower. Your breath catches walking up a single stone step. You forget the name of that herb you've used for 40 years. You remember later, of course, like a stubborn ember flaring back. But the pause stays with you. You know it's time to write things down. So you begin not a grand scroll or engraved bronze codex, just a stack of mulberry pages stitched with red thread. Your handwriting is crooked now, but it still loops the same way it did when you first labeled jars with "volatile, do not sniff." You fill the pages with diagrams, notes, corrections, jokes only an alchemist would understand. You include recipes for noise, for color, for movement. But not just the how, also the why. Why certain powders rise instead of scatter. Why heat changes emotion. Why a mistake, if approached kindly, can become a discovery. Your apprentices bring you tea, ask questions, and sometimes just sit beside you listening to your pages flutter in the breeze. They don't say it, but they know too. You're wrapping up. You remember stories your mentor told you about old masters becoming stars or transforming into cranes that vanish into clouds. You never believed them. Still don't. But one afternoon, as you nap in the workshop, a small firefly lands on your palm and stays there longer than it should. You blink awake, and for just a moment, you almost think it's one of your early prototypes. The ones that never quite worked. Too heavy, too smoky, too eager to explode in their jars. But no, it's just a bug. You laugh gently and fall asleep again. Later, people say they saw something strange that night. Not a funeral, not a procession, just a soft shimmer over your garden. Light, but no sound. A sky bloom that didn't come from any known formula. Historians still argue whether it was ceremonial or coincidence, whether your apprentices staged it, or if it was atmospheric trickery, or just a well-timed meteor. But people remember it. They say it looked like a dragon folding its wings. Your workshop becomes a quiet shrine, not formal, not fenced off, just respected. Children still sneak in hoping for leftover sparklers. Lovers scribble wishes on mulberry paper and tuck them in the cracks between bricks. And fireworks, they change. They become ritual, performance, celebration, protest, romance. They light up New Year skies in Shanghai, Diwali nights in Delhi, Bastille Day in Paris, Independence Day in the U.S. They mark births, mournings, elections endings. They appear above stadiums, oceans, battlefields, street corners. All because someone in a soot-covered robe once leaned over a bowl of sulfur and saltpeter and said, "What if?" You're not forgotten. You're not remembered perfectly either. People get your name wrong. Attribute quotes to the wrong dynasty. Use your recipes for things you never imagined war, mostly. But also weddings, and birthdays, and summer nights too hot to sleep without a little spectacle. And every time someone looks up, you're there. Not watching exactly, just present. Like a glow under the skin of memory. Eventually, some museum somewhere builds a reconstruction of your lab. Glass cases, animatronic dummy with your beard, a button that plays a whooshing sound. You'd roll your eyes, but also maybe you'd smile, because it worked. You didn't make gold. You didn't cheat death. You didn't crack heaven open. You made wonder, and wonder lasts. So now with that last flicker fading, you let yourself drift. Not upward like a rocket, not downward like a falling star, just sideways into calm. The smoke clears. The garden grows quiet. Somewhere your apprentices are still tinkering. Somewhere someone's lighting a fuse, eyes wide with anticipation. You're not there anymore, but your work is. And that's enough. The sky you once tried to paint is painting itself now. The constellations blink gently like they remember you. You take a breath, slow, steady, softened by sleep. And in that breath you feel everything: the scent of hot paper, the way the night crackles before a good firework, the whisper of ancient scrolls being turned in moonlight. Even the failures glow a little here at the end, because nothing was wasted. Not the ash, not the noise, not the mess. You turned chaos into color fear, into fun curiosity, into legacy. And now it's time to let go. So you do. No bang, no flash, just quiet. And one final breath that tastes like sparks. Sleep well.